All right, so we're going to work on finding acceleration from free body diagrams with given information, okay? And there's not going to be a whole lot of reading. It's going to be more just learning how to solve. So here's our first box. We got gravity of 80 newtons, applied force of 50, friction of 10. So the things we're trying to find: normal force, mass, acceleration, and net force. And we will do that now. Okay, let's start solving these. So here's what we got. We got gravity going down, applied force going this way at 50, friction going this way at 10. First thing, we're on a flat surface, so normal force and gravity are the same, so my normal force will be 80 newtons. And then I look at equations, okay? Net force is equal to ma, and that's the one I'm looking at here, all right? So if I can find net force and mass, I can find A using this equation. So that's what I'm going to do. Here's the other equation that's going to be beneficial. Gravity is equal to mass times 9.8. So my force of gravity is 80. So force gravity equals mass times 9.8. My force of gravity is 80 is equal to mass times 9.8. Divide by 9.8. And mass equals 80 divided by 9.8. 8.2 kilograms. So my mass, 8.2. So now I know mass. Now I want to find net force. And that's just like what we did previously. Here, 80, 80. It's the same. So my net force in the vertical, 0. Horizontal, 50 and 10. I got 50 this way, 10 this way. So I add them up. 50 minus 10, because 10's going left, gives me a net force of 40 newtons. Net force is 40. Now I can use this equation, all right? And I can say 40 is equal to my mass of 8.2 times A. Divide both sides by 8.2, and I can find my A. So 40 divided by 8.2 gives me 4.87. I'll go 4.9. So there's how I find my acceleration. Okay, so on this box, the one thing that's different is we're adding coefficient of friction. So we have an applied force of 20, gravitational force of 100 newtons, and a frictional force of 10 newtons. We're trying to find normal force, coefficient of friction, which is mu, mass, A, acceleration, and net force. Do it. So here's our drawing. Force of gravity is 100 newtons. Applied force is 20. Frictional force is 10. Let's start solving. We know we're on a flat surface. Normal force and gravity are the same, so normal force is 100. All right. I can find mu using this equation. Force of friction equals normal force times mu. So force of friction equals normal force times mu. Force of friction is 10. My normal force is 100. Divide both sides by 100. 0.1 is my mu. Now I start looking at these other things, and so it doesn't matter where we start. I'm going to go net force this time. Net force here, it's 100 and 100, so these two balance, and I'm looking 20 and 10. So I got 20 going this way. So 20 minus 10 equals 10. So my net force is 10 newtons. To find my mass, I can use this equation, which is force of gravity equals mass times 9.8. My force of gravity is 100 equals mass times 9.8. Divide by 9.8. And mass equals 100 divided by 9.8. 10.2 kilograms. So my mass is 10.2. And then to find my acceleration, I use this equation, Newton's second law. Force net equals mass times acceleration. Net force, 10. My mass, 10.2. Divide everything by 10.2. My acceleration is 0.98. So just like the first one, except We just added coefficient of friction. Okay, a little different. We have a force of friction of 10 newtons, and we have a mu of, I'm sorry, we don't have a force of friction. We don't know what that is. My bad. Our force of friction is unknown, and our mu is 0.1, and our mass is 5 kilograms. So things we can solve for. Well, let's start off with this. Force of gravity equals mass times 9.8. So force of gravity is equal to mass times 9.8. My mass is 5, so force of gravity is equal to 5 times 9.8. Force of gravity is equal to 49 newtons, so 49 newtons. Flat surface, normal force is 49 newtons. Let's look over at friction. Force of friction is here. I know normal force and I know coefficient. So if I know normal force and coefficient, I can solve for friction. So force of friction is equal to normal force times coefficient of friction. Normal force is 49. Coefficient of friction is 0.1. My force of friction is 4.9 newtons. So I'm cruising along. Net force, nothing this way, 49 newtons that way. So my net force is negative 4.9, so I'm going to the left. Hold on, get a drink. I know net force and mass. I can solve for acceleration. So net force equals m times a. Net force is negative 4.9. My mass is 5. Divide by 5. My acceleration is negative 4.9 divided by 5. Negative 0.98. So as long as we know certain things, we can solve for everything using those three equations. So to review the equations. Net force equal to mass times acceleration. Gravity, which is weight, is equal to mass times g, which is 9.8. And then our new equation, force of friction, is equal to normal force times mu, which is the coefficient of friction.